Being human. All right. What don't you understand about people?
I don't understand why people would succumb to anything other than reason to make their decisions. I think rationality should be a core tenet of any decision you make.
But does that mean that you believe the only faculty we have to understand is our brain?
Well, no, because rationality is actually a very encompassing thing. It is to say that for whatever goal you want to achieve, you must follow a series of logically coherent steps. Yes, so if the degree to which you say that this is important for decision making, my answer is yes. I think this is maybe
Oh,
the
you're a
only.
real scientist. You're a real scientist. If there's one thing you could change about your childhood, what would it be?
I would definitely be reading more books. Uh, Started reading quite relatively late, maybe my primary 5 years. So I would have started
Yeah,
earlier. I did.
good answer. What advice would you give your younger self?
I would say keep inquiring, keep asking questions. I mean, I'm lucky that no teacher of mine subdued that trait of mine, and so I would only say keep doing that.
Do you trust yourself?
No, actually, not entirely. I this is a hard question. I don't trust myself too much. There's a scope to which I trust myself, but there's a scope in which I also do not trust myself
But
in
now
just
I'm
in
curious about the spark. Like, what makes you doubt yourself? Like, what makes it such a difficult question?
well, because if you look at how you feel in any given moment, like today, you can make a prediction about how you feel like tomorrow, and you will be entirely wrong. So, for example, if you're supposed to be in a committed relationship or in a partnership with someone, and you give them your word, well, it's because you project what you think you'd be in the future, and then the future can come, and then your mind changes. Just by the sheer fact that we can change our minds that easily, and it seems that we are not in control, is the degree to which I do not trust myself. But I do try to be consistent regardless.
Oh, wow. I can see how this is going to conflict with your scientific nature, right?
Exactly.
Well, so why are so many people their own worst enemy or standing in their own way?
Well, because they feel, I mean, they underestimate themselves. They fail to take this journey of 1,000 miles with a single step. So in that sense, they are the enemy of themselves by putting this barricade in front of them and saying that this insurmountable task cannot be scaled.
So can you boil it down to fear, the fear of taking the first step?
It is the fear of trying to take the first step. I agree.
So fear seems to be the thing that preventing us from like, or forcing us to stand in our own way. It's crippling. Like I think Winston Churchill said, the greatest thing to fear is fear itself. Because of that, right? It's our own. It makes us our own worst enemy. What
True.
gives you hope about the future, if anything?
Well, I like the way we are tending, at least in some sense, tending towards rationality, towards the epoch of reason, and
Have you
making
been
everything.
following American politics lately?
So there's a limited sense. There's a limited sense in which I hold this view. I think on the scientific front, we are more critical. We are trying to solve more problems than we could, and it's been this ever sort of rolling uh, field of just incorporating what we do, looking back at what we got wrong, and getting them right in the future. So I think we're doing a lot on the field of rationality.
Yeah, I think if you ask this question to somebody in Ukraine, right, or somebody being drafted to go to the war in
True.
Russia,
True.
I mean, how much hope could you have in the future if your country is embroiled in some terrible invasion at the hands of an egomaniac like Putin? I mean,
Right.
because for us to answer yes, we have hope is a credit to our society, our country that's peaceful, right?
True. True.
All
That
right.
is right.
What's the one thing that needs to happen in your estimation for our world to be a better place?
I think we should succumb to reason. Again, I'll come back because this is my core. I think once we think about issues, good enough, but I have to qualify this that the goal of that rational aim should be one that's virtuous. So it's not just a crude code calculation. It's like what is it that we value? Truth, uh,
Yeah.
well-being. Then we should work
Well,
towards
I
true reason.
totally agree, and I think that's the problem with the biggest problem that Donald Trump represents is the death of truth.
It's
And
true.
because we need to agree in order to stand on the right side of an issue together.
Exactly.
And
We
and,
need
and so
to.
we can't get anything done if we're constantly bickering about if this is an actual problem or not, if it's like climate change.
That is exactly right.
Sorry, now I'm answering your questions for you.
No, that's fine.
All right. What can you do to make your life more meaningful?
I think the number one thing that one can do to make their life more meaningful is to have more warmer connections, more warmer friendship. So this is an empirical question which has been answered by the Harvard Grant study. So having more good relationships with your friends, I'll shout out Emil here because he's a good friend of mine, and some other friends I have like Sunny and me. So these are people that make my life more meaningful. Even though I don't tell them often as often as I should, they do make my life more meaningful.
And everybody on their deathbed always says I should have spent more time with my family, my loved ones. It always seems to be the same message, like, if you want to do something meaningful, then bolster your relationships, pay attention to your friends, your family.
Right. For good
um
reason.
do you believe in karma, or that you're paying off karma in this life from a previous life or someone else's actions or your own?
It was a question of epistemology. I don't know if that is the case, but I don't think there's good reason to think that we're paying off something, some debt. I think karma, to the extent in which it says that if you do some good thing to other people, you're more likely to do something good to you. I mean, it's not a question, it's not a statement of certainty. It's more of a probabilistic argument that is someone more likely to do something good to you if you do something good to them? The answer is yes, because we have this reciprocity ingrained in our senses. And if you do something bad to someone, are they more likely to do something bad to you? I think the answer is an empirical yes. It's not
But
mystic here.
in your empirical, rational thinking way, how do you make sense of spiritual matters? Like thoughts, they say in the spirit world, thoughts are like bullets in the physical world.
Right,
They have reactions. You can send thought out into the cosmos, and then you'll get an answer, a reaction to that thought. That's why they say be careful what you think, or be
right,
careful what you wish for. And so how do you square that? Like that things can be real, even though you can't measure them or explain them.
right. I like to compartmentalize them into this non-overlapping magisteria in which, I mean, science answers the question of how do these things work, and maybe spirituality and religion I could attempt to answer the question how do these things work. But when you say something like does karma exist? I mean, it's not a question of, it's not a why question, it's a how question, right? Are people more likely to do good things if you do good things to them? I think the answer is yes. Maybe it's embedded in some greater spiritual framework. I have no answer to that per se. But
I
I do
love
think
that. Embedded in some greater
it,
spiritual framework. I'm going to use that. I have a feeling I'm going to use a lot of your language in future classes. All right. Well, how do you want to be remembered by people after you're gone?
I would hope that people remember me as a kind person, as a compassionate person, as someone who was passionate about science and reasoning and philosophy, and just living the most honest possible life I could live, I think.
Wow, nice. And so, speaking of death, what happens to us after we die?
Yeah, that's a question of epistemology. I can't say what exists after death. I'm not too. I mean, if you want to subscribe to a religious framework, you would say that there is some afterlife.
But why are you so desperate to cling on to reason? Why
Why
can't
am
you? Yeah, no, but why can't you? It's almost like you're scared to entertain anything outside of reason.
I? Well, no, because this question is it's a question of I should be able to. I mean, it's a question of fact. Is there something after this? I can't
No,
know.
it's not. It's not a question because nobody can tell you the fact. It's a
Right,
question of hypothesis. So, what
right.
do you
No,
think?
well, I think if we were to look at the framework of, well, I mean, so if we use inductive reasoning and say, well, what happens to things when, what seems to happen to things when they die? It's that, as Emil said, they decompose. But again, we don't even have a question, an answer to what is consciousness, how does it arise? Because if we look at pure materialism, we don't know where exactly we can place consciousness. Where were the building blocks of consciousness in the evolutionary span of history? So then if we have this gap in our knowledge of how consciousness works, how we are able to reflect on the nature of ourselves, then it seems to me that we cannot answer the question properly. but what happens after death to this immaterial soul or to the consciousness after death? I mean, if there is no answer to how does this thing arise, then I'm not sure if you can answer what happens to it when we.
Is it important for you to believe in an afterlife? Or are you okay with just the idea of decomposing?
So this is a question of utility. So if the framework in which we are thinking about this is in the Christian framework, which is the religion in which I was brought up in, the consequence of not being in the domain of the good is that you suffer eternal condemnation. So to that degree, if we decompose, that will be, if I was to choose between both of them, I have to choose that we just decompose, because then the alternative to all those who do not exist in this domain of good is some kind of suffering that is insurmountable, right? So it seems that the best option here to choose from, if I were to choose, would be that we just decompose.
All right. And last question. Who is someone in your life that you would say is a huge inspiration to you?
Ooh. Someone in my life, do they have to be in spatial or temporal relationship? Could they be people I've read about?
Sure.
I would say, ooh, this is hard. Can I mention multiple people?
Yeah, it's your interview. Do what you want.
So Steven Pinker has definitely been an influence on me. Paul Bloom, Sam Harris, all these people, and David Benatar, actually. He's a philosopher that talks about antinatalism. They have influenced the way I think, in somewhat, yeah.
I like listening to Sam Harris too.
Yeah,
Although I think he's a little bit too critical of the Muslims,
right. He
but he
is.
comes from the very, I guess, Jewish framework or something like that. But I like him. I really respect his mind and his the way he speaks, the way he can articulate himself.
Your
Very
thoughts.
clear-headed. And
Yeah.
do you know a guy named Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes, I do. I do know him. Yeah.
Because talk about everyday philosophy, right? This is a guy that I think that you could almost frame your trajectory after his, because he's known as a modern day Canadian philosopher.
Right. And he seems to be a polymath as well. He knows a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, Larry, it's been a real joy having you on my program. Thank you for joining me.
Well, this has been a pleasure. It's been an interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to how this comes out.